At your job, do you ever have to deal with a nose roller? How about a snub pulley? Well, if you're installing a new conveyor belt system, dealing with the different components can sound like you're speaking a foreign language. Luckily, you've got a team ready to help. Grainger's technical product specialists are fluent in maintenance, repair, and operations. So whenever you want to talk shop, just reach out. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Frank Gore Jr., Southern Miss Golden Eagles, and you listen to Fun Belt Podcast. Southern Miss to the
Fun
top.
Belt Podcast.
Fun Belt Podcast.
Fun Belt Podcast.
Fun Belt Podcast.
It's just a great conference that is at a point right now where they're, I think, clearly the best group of five conference in the country.
The state of Sun Belt football is the strongest in our history.
And we got to continue to showcase what our league's about.
Fun Belt Podcast. The gang is all back together. None of us have hit the transfer portal just yet.
We're all here.
Tears are rolling down Jeremy's cheeks as we realize that the 2022 season has come to an end.
Tears of joy and relief. Thank God Almighty, Thibs, that this season is over.
But not without controversy, of course.
Oh, don't pray tell.
I mean, we have the Sun Belt Western Division champs, obviously, in Troy. Well deserved, well earned.
Yeah, sure. You know, it's because all the teams in that division were eligible to fight it out, and they, you know what, they determined who was going to get that division title based on play on the field.
And it was not Arkansas State.
No, it wasn't ULM either.
You're damn right. But then on the East,
Oh, okay.
First of all, are we really surprised that it's Coastal Carolina that will be headed to Troy to represent the Eastern Division? Or is anybody really surprised at that?
All right, yes, because all of us said at the beginning of the year, Coastal isn't all that. And we were like, well, you know, Grayson McCall is hurt. He's coming back from that injury. They lost too many guys. Appalachian State's going to be strong. The East is a meat grinder. Coastal Carolina is too soft to handle that. I don't know about you, Thibs, and I don't know about you, Shane Metlin, but for me, I'm a little bit surprised that ended up being Coastal Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't pick Coastal to begin with. We have to admit that. I think we were all pretty high on App to start of the season. I probably would have put Coastal in a group of 3 or 4 that I thought maybe had a shot, but they wouldn't necessarily have been my number one pick. So,
Yeah, I think, Shane, if I recall, some of us were more enthusiastic about like Georgia State than we were about Coastal Carolina. We thought maybe, and I don't recall anybody thinking about JMU very much either, except one guy. One guy in this group might have been thinking JMU.
Yeah, Kurt Signetti.
Now, I mean, I really thought App was a pretty strong favorite to start the season, and it didn't turn out to be.
Yeah, and I know that we're going to discuss, you know, the controversy between JMU and Coastal and whether or not it's fair that JMU has been, and I guess that's the controversy you're talking about, right, Thibs?
That is correct. That JMU, with the same 6-2 record and having beat Coastal Carolina in a normal year, would have been your Eastern Division champs. Instead, not eligible due to transition year. So it's Coastal Carolina. But James Madison, JMU, the Dukes, the Purple, they say, you know what? We're the Eastern champs. And you know, I like the rivalry. I like the controversy of it. But you knew damn well coming into it, when you signed up to go up to FBS, when you signed up to join the Sun Belt, you weren't eligible. This wasn't sprung on you December 1st, where all of a sudden Keith Gill's yanking the carpet out from under you. You knew going into it, and you knew based on history you were going to run the tables and be a damn good team. And you were going to have nothing to show for it. Am I the only one that thinks that?
No, in fact, I'm a kind of a rules kind of guy. And Jane, I know that you want to weigh in on this. I think you'll have some penetrating insight on it. But one thing that I did kind of hope that JMU was going to lose that game, only so I wouldn't have to bear or feel any of those slings and arrows flying by my head as the two factions fought it off. But the same thing happened. Am I correct to Georgia Southern and
Correct.
Appalachian State?
But that year there were no divisions, and so Georgia Southern was atop the standings, and so they were conference champs, just ineligible to go any further.
That's right. Okay, so it's not like this is something that's brand new. I do agree that JMU was the better team, and that is not something that I know that I didn't predict. I think I had them finishing next to last or last. I had them finishing last simply because I didn't know anything about James Madison. Seeing them play in person, watching them throughout the year, I've come to realize that James Madison is a damn good team. I think Coastal Carolina is a damn good team. But I would like to hear what they're saying, Shane, out there in your neck of the woods. What are they saying about this setup for James Madison, Coastal Carolina, and you being denied your shot at taking a Sun Belt title?
I think probably it's less about playing in a championship game. There's a lot of that talk about like, oh, the rule's stupid, it shouldn't still exist, but they did know what they were getting into. I think what's been more interesting, at least to me, is like learning how differently different conferences handle their divisions. And like, I remember years past where back when the Big 12 had divisions, if there was a tie, you have co-champions, but then there's a tiebreaker for who plays in the thing. And, apparently that's not the case in the Sun Belt, where whoever plays in the championship game is the champion. Like I was, joking around in the press box, what if you had 5 teams that were ineligible for bowls for whatever reason, probation or APR or whatever? Like, could you be sending your 3rd or 4th place team and calling them the champion? Like it'd be kind of funny if that ever happened, but
that might be the only way the Red Wolves and the Warhawks ever get a shot at championship.
But yeah, it's been a lot of debate about something that's just completely semantics on how the conference decides to declare something, because obviously JMU can rightfully claim first place, but they can't claim champions, and it's just the wording of it is really like the only debate. And like I did find it interesting that was reading up on Jamie Chadwell's contract, and he gets a huge bonus for division championships, which he apparently will get now, even though different situation.
I'm glad that this bizarre setup enabled him to earn just a little bit more money out of Coastal Carolina. I think that's pretty cool. And so, guys, is this the same setup too for basketball? We know James Madison could have a very good season in basketball too. Is there a chance that James Madison won't be your basketball champion as well?
No,
it's a football only.
They're in for every other sport. It's just football, because football was moving up in divisions. Everything else is just all in the 1A basket, or in the Division 1 basket.
And bowling, Jeremy. You don't have to worry about Arkansas State's bowling. That is safe. James Madison will not take that from you.
James Madison couldn't even hope to take bowling from us. Red Wolves are the predominant bowling school in the Mid-South, so I don't have anything to worry about James Madison.
Predominant?
I don't even know. I've had half a beer. I've been sick. I've had a little bit of COVID. So, I'm not at my best. I might drop a few words that aren't actually words. I might slip into a coma. I don't know what's going to happen with this show, Thibs.
We never know what's going to happen with this show any week.
But anyway, congratulations to James Madison. Let's admit, we didn't realize that James Madison was going to be this dominant. Had that struggle with 3 losses, and we thought, well, maybe James Madison is human after all. Came back strong with some wins at the end. That win against Coastal, Thibs, did you watch this game, by the way?
I watched a lot of Sunbelt football this past weekend.
Did you see the James Madison game over Coastal?
That whooping sure did.
It started off with Coastal with the whooping, right? They come up with the 7 points.
Guest looked very good.
I think both of us made a similar comment on the Twitters about how McCall must be a system quarterback because, apparently anybody can run that system and be successful. And then they didn't score again.
That was so nice of him to let James Madison back into the conversation for a division championship.
Yeah, we could have all this unseemliness could have been avoided had James Madison just done the polite thing and just allowed Coastal to win. That's actually kind of rude, Shane. Shane, you need to go to your people and explain to them a little bit of something like I like to call Southern manners.
Yeah, well, Curt Cignetti, I mean, he did live in Morgantown, West Virginia when he was younger, but he's more of a Pennsylvania guy. He's a Yankee. He doesn't necessarily have the Southern hospitality. And, quite honestly, he definitely doesn't have any Southern hospitality for Jamie Chadwell. I don't think those two get along.
If I know one thing about Coach Cignetti is that he doesn't give a shit. I love that guy. He's just such a cool customer. But hey, let's talk a little bit about the Western champs, Thibs. Let's talk a little bit about Troy. I did pick Troy and South Alabama to be the top two teams. I think I ended up picking Troy. I'll have to look back to make sure. Simply because I thought they were going to be the most complete program out of a bunch of programs that weren't complete at all. But the West turned out to be pretty competitive, did it not?
It did. It was great. To me, the real story of that Troy Trojan offense, though, not to take anything away from Gunnar Watson. I like Gunnar, think he's a great quarterback. Hope he sticks around and is not going to try to upsell himself in the portal. Okay. But Kamani Vidal, that guy is an absolute beast. I thought when he went ham against ULM that was kind of his peak of the season. No. 4 touchdowns, 208 against Arkansas State. And I'm anxious to see what he can do this weekend against Coastal Carolina, knowing that we saw in James Madison game, they couldn't stop the run.
Well, here's something too about Troy that sort of surprised me. They didn't score any points all year. It was all defense. It was Carlton Marshall. It was that big defensive line. They did all the heavy work. And then suddenly Vidal comes around, who he was mostly invisible for the first half of the season. I don't know if he was hurt. I don't know what was going on. Didn't really hear about the guy. Suddenly he's putting up back-to-back 200-yard games and giving the Trojans a wrinkle that they didn't have all season long. And that, to me, makes them the most dangerous team in the Sun Belt. And I believe, are they not the Vegas favorite to win this game?
Yeah, I believe a 2-touchdown favorite.
Yeah. Well, they're playing at Veterans Stadium, which
Larry Blakeney field.
That's right. Thank you for completing that thought for me. And I don't see any reason why Troy cannot win this game, especially with Grayson McCall not behind center.
Yeah, I would be surprised if Troy doesn't win, honestly, unless Grayson McCall comes back and has, the hero's triumphant return where he just carries Coastal Carolina. I really think Troy should win this one by a couple touchdowns.
Reminiscent of the time that Colton Browning at ULM miraculously returned after a cracked sternum after drinking, I don't know, goat's blood or something that miraculously healed him and returned him to the starting lineup. But the Warhawks still didn't do very well in 2013.
I can't believe that you dropped a Colton Browning reference on a day that should be all about Troy and Coastal Carolina. You have to bring in the great Colton Browning to smudge the accomplishments of these two great programs.
One of my favorite quarterbacks ever is a Troy Trojan of Omar Hoggabook, and I saw the Warhawks take down Larry Blakeney and his Trojans and Omar Hoggabook in Malone Stadium.
The old man of the podcast happens to be the youngest guy on the podcast. That's the weirdest thing about all of it. But that's okay. So, all right, but here's one thing I wanted to throw at you guys. I don't know if we're going to recap last week's games or not. Don't know if it's even necessary, especially since Arkansas State lost. But
they did look good.
They had their moments.
For about 3 quarters.
3 quarters, and then the fourth quarter came, as usual. But one thing I would like to say, and I'd like to throw it to both of you guys, was the West much stronger this year than we thought it was going to be?
I think so. I think, I didn't expect much out of Southern Miss at all. And, they ended up being, pretty solid. Troy and South Alabama are as good as anybody in the conference, and, even, a ULM that didn't have much expectation for not a winning record, but they were competitive. They factored into how things played out. I just think, the division was pretty strong. I mean, Texas State coach gets fired after not making a bowl game again, but they're beating App. They're in games. It's it was entire conference top to bottom was really tough.
Yeah, you got Cajuns beating the Georgia Southern. You've got you got some upsets over there. In the end, I think head to head, the East ended up winning more games over the West than the West over the East. But it was very close. And I think it's not only that the West was a little bit stronger than we thought. I think the East, in some regards, maybe not on the top, but on the bottom was a little weaker than we thought. I think Georgia State was a huge disappointment this year. Yeah. I think Old Dominion kind of ended up being the team everybody thought they were going to be, a struggling team, even though they started off strong. I think Georgia Southern, they became bowl eligible, which is great. And they were much better than anybody anticipated, but they still could get beat. So, and then Marshall, very disappointing for most of the season, ended up kind of coming back strong at the end, but looked very beatable at times. So I think when the season started, and Thibs and I think both agreed when we were at the Sun Belt Conference Media Days, that the East was coming in with such confidence. They just seemed like every program in the East walked in like they were just going to win the championship. Every program from the West came in talking kind of like they're rebuilding, and it just didn't quite work out that way.
9 bowl eligible teams, though, with 5 being in the East. It makes me lean a little bit more that the East was kind of the legitimate division.
Oh, I agree.
But the West, 2 10-win teams. What more could you ask for?
You can't ask for more. All right, so let me ask you guys this. The most disappointing team. Thibs, you first.
I'm actually going to go Texas State. I really thought that Spav's experiment of JUCO transfer heavy was really going to pay off. Not necessarily that they were going to be a 10-win team, but they would be a 6, maybe 7-win team and kind of win one for the Gipper and keep him around another year. Yeah, that didn't happen.
I did think that in a what we perceived as a soft Sun Belt West, that Texas State actually had a chance to make some noise. They did not, although they did beat Appalachian State. How about you, Shane? Who was the most disappointing program in the Sun Belt this year?
I think I'm going to lean towards App State. I mean, I expect them to win the East. Them possibly not qualifying for a bowl never even really crossed my mind. Just to me, they're probably the most disappointing. I considered Georgia State, but that would probably be my most disappointing.
Yeah, you know what? Because you picked Appalachian State, I'm going to pick Georgia State, and not simply because I thought Georgia State was going to be a better team than Appalachian State, but mostly because I kind of started buying into the hype, the preseason hype, that Georgia State was this program that was ready to make waves. And at times they seem like they were. I mean, they looked great against James Madison that first half. I mean, they're causing Shane, do you remember how many fumbles James Madison had in that game?
They had 7 fumbles, and I think
that's an incredible amount of fumbles.
I think they lost 4 of them. Yeah, it was incredible.
I don't know how you win a game with that many fumbles, but they were that kind of team. They could create that kind of mayhem, and for whatever reason they could not close out. I really don't understand what happened to Georgia State. I never really believed that they were this great team, but I thought they were going to be better than that. Thibs, what was to you? What was the most surprising team?
I think the most surprising team, honestly, was James Madison. Even though we had Shane and we had Noah in our ears telling us how great they were going to be, I don't think we bought into it. It's like, okay, we know that they're a good FCS school, but I feel like they really turned it on and showed that they belong, showed that they can compete, showed that they're ready to go. Now I'm interested to see, do they hit that sophomore slump or do they keep rising up? I'll do a 1B of the most surprising team, the Raging Cajuns. I think that we knew that they lost a lot of talent. The new coaching staff, they were almost as much of a mystery as Old Dominion of not knowing really what to expect out of that team. And I think they pleasantly surprised us, showing that they could still hang around, go 6-6, and more than likely will be headed to a postseason bowl game.
I think that is an interesting take you took on Louisiana, because I was looking at them as a disappointment. When we were at Sunbelt Conference Media Days, I mean, how confident was everybody around us telling us that, it's going to be another Cajuns Appalachian State showdown. Sorry, Cajuns are the defending champs. And they came out really weak. Now, they did come out with some good wins, and you're right, they did become bowl eligible. But quite frankly, is after being Sunbelt champ and just squeaking in as bowl eligible, is that good? Or are you right? They lost a lot, and they kind of rose above their means.
For this year, I think being bowl eligible was a great step forward, even. And I told you even back at Sunbelt Media Days, I think the over under was 8.5. I said take the under. I said I'm not saying that they're not a bad team. I just don't see that they're going to win 9 games.
All right, that's good analysis. How about you, Thibs? You, Shane. Who did you see as a surprise program?
I would say Southern Miss probably surprised me the most, just because if you told me they got bowl eligible, I could believe that, but I would have had to said, okay, one of those quarterbacks just established himself as the guy, and they settled that, and their offense was humming. And if you told me they were still kind of just playing a whole bunch of different quarterbacks, and Frank Gore is a super back, and mixing and matching all these different approaches on offense, and got to 6 wins, I would not have believed that. I just been really impressed by Will Hall finding ways to be competitive, even when he's had a lot of disadvantages since he took over.
I think to win 6 wins in a division that had 2 programs get 10 wins is pretty good. And for Will Hall to do that in his first year at Southern Miss is extraordinary. They're also one of those teams that I can't put my finger on what makes them good. I know the defense is pretty good, but other than that, and Frank Gore, we all know Frank Gore Jr. is really good. But there's something about that team that I just could not figure out. I think it's just some sort of Hattiesburg magic that makes that team really good.
I loved it even after they beat ULM this past weekend to close out the season. Walked down there to do some post-game interviews there with Southern Miss players. Yeah. The cigar smoke was pouring out of the visiting locker room, and it was fantastic.
They've got to be happy with themselves. I think they won 3 games last year, 2 games last year, something like that.
3 and 9.
Yeah, that's just a miraculous recovery from that, and they've got to be really happy with their new head coach. I think my surprise team was Georgia Southern. Not necessarily that they're bowl eligible, although a little bit of that, But the way they became bowl eligible, I really did not believe that the switch from that funky triple option offense that they had, and then going just the sort of traditional pass heavy offense. How could that possibly work after 1 year? How do you get the personnel that makes that happen? How do you get the quarterback, the wide receivers, the offensive line to make that transition in 1 year? I think Clay Helton did an amazing job at Georgia Southern. Does it go into the next year? Is Van Treese back? He was a 1 year guy, right?
One and done.
So yeah. So I don't know how you continue that momentum, but congratulations to Clay Helton, the Eagles coming back from that awful season from last year. They were my surprise team.
This past weekend, everything was focused on the West, not knowing what was going on. But we knew that the Chants were going to be champions of the East and headed to the Sun Belt Conference Championship. And the guy that always has the front row seat for it, we love listening to him on the radio when we can find him online, Joe Cashion. Did I say it right this time?
just Cashion. Just Cashion. That's a lot simpler than it looks.
Hey, one day we'll actually get it right there, Joe. But
that's okay.
Joe has the front row seat being the voice of the Chanticleers. Joe, tell me about this season and kind of how exciting was it coming into this year?
First of all, thank you for having me on and having the opportunity to talk about Coastal football here tonight. This has been an exciting season for us. Not really a whole lot of expected. I mean, there were some expectations coming off 20 and 21, but given all that we had lost in terms of personnel, in terms of production, a lot of new faces on both sides of the ball, we were not picked to win the East. I think maybe second, in some magazines, third and whatnot, and some others. Still expected to do well, but I don't know that anybody expected us to go 9-2, quite frankly. And of course, a lot of those wins were very, very close. We're a 9-2 football team with a +7 overall scoring differential this season. +7. That's it. We have 9 wins, outscored our opponents all together in 11 games by 7 points. And so we've won a lot of close ball games. A lot of that's attributable to the culture that we have. Our kids just believe that we're going to win, game in and game out. It doesn't matter what the situation is. Doesn't matter the opponent. Doesn't matter where we are going into the fourth quarter. We just, find a way to win. And that's kind of what we did 9 out of 11 times this season.
Being someone affiliated with a team, 4 wins, I definitely want to have the problem of only having a 9-win season. But when you watch Coastal football, there's nothing flashy. There's nothing great other than Grayson McCall. I think you can kind of circle him as kind of the X factor, but there's nothing that's just really like, all right, that's why they're winning. What is the secret to Chants football?
Well, I do think we do some things that are unique on offense that are tough to get ready for. The spread option that we run, that's kind of difficult to prepare for. There's really not a lot of offenses, hardly any, that do what we do and do it with a guy like you just mentioned in Grayson McCall, who runs it so well. He knows, where to go with the football every single time. It seems like 1 interception this season. That's it. 7 in his career over 3 seasons. So he knows where to go with the ball, how to run that offense. We do it so very well. When we execute, we are very hard to stop on offense. Defensively, we played well enough at times. Now, we haven't been as consistent really on either side of the ball that we would like. Defensively, we haven't been as consistent. We've had a couple of games where we just, haven't played particularly well. The Old Dominion game, we didn't play well offensively that day either. And then, of course, nobody really played well at all in any phase last week up at James Madison. So we just, you're right about the fact that we don't do a lot of flashy stuff, but we do some unique things that are hard to defend. And, our defense has forced 21 turnovers this season, which is pretty good. You can live off that, turning the ball over and stealing possessions from other teams. So we just find a way. That's just what it is. You go week to week. You hear this all the time. I know it sounds cliche, but kids talk about going 1-0. You figure out how to get this win and then move on to the next one. Doesn't really matter how you get there.
You mentioned the defense and causing the turnovers, and Jamie Chadwell yesterday on his teleconference talked about how in some ways this was kind of supposed to be a rebuilding year.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's probably even more the case on defense. Was there anybody in particular that just surprised you with how much they stepped up this year?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I mean, I feel like we had several guys that kind of really stepped up and played well. I mean, when Shane Bruce was healthy or has been healthy this season, he's been a difference maker in there in the run game. When he was out, we really missed him, but he stepped in there, that linebacker spot, and has done a really good job for us. JT Killen in there is also a first-year starter. He's done awfully well. He's our leading tackler this season. Gerard Clark, we knew that was a known factor at nose coming in this year, but he has been so dominant in there. I mean, just the kind of NFL prospect that we thought that he was, and he really kind of showed that this season. I mean, he is so hard to block in there. When we play well defensively, he's leading the way because we don't let people rush the football. He takes up those gaps and he just dominates in there. When he plays well, he's the leader of that defense. And as far as I'm concerned, but we have had guys that have stepped up kind of across the board as a team that have, when we played well, they have played well. And when we've had these breakdowns here and there, it just kind of seems to go south on us some. But yeah, we had a lot to replace on that side. And, for the most part, I think we've done a fairly decent job of it.
Do you feel that we've seen the last game of McCall wearing that teal uniform?
Ooh. I hope not. I'll put it to you that way. I hope not. The prognosis was 3 to 6 weeks a few weeks ago. So we're kind of in that window now. It's just going to depend, hopefully we'll see, Jamie obviously non-committal because we don't know anything yet about this weekend. Hopefully if we get a bowl game, whenever that is, that'll be another couple of weeks after. So at least maybe, if not this weekend, hopefully the bowl game. Because I would, the App State game was a great game for us to win. And he went out there and gutted that thing out after he hurt his foot in the third quarter. And he came back on the field and hit that big pass down towards the end to help us keep the football. And he went out there, to take the last snap. And, you're kind of thinking, we knew he was hurt, thinking, hopefully this isn't the last time we see him. Hopefully it wasn't the last time we see him. If not this weekend, and of course we won't know anything, for another few days, who knows? Hopefully in a bowl game, we'll get to, send him out in a way that he deserves after his career.
And then, the coaching carousel is spinning wildly. Jamie Chadwell, of course, was going to be the head coach at Georgia Tech. Not true there. Then he was going to go to Nebraska. Not true there. Willie Fritz was going to Georgia Tech, and Chadwell was going to Tulane. Is Chadwell really going anywhere, do you think?
It's so hard to say. I mean, it just depends. It really depends. I will tell you this. It's not going to be about money. If he takes a job, it will not be because of money. I think he likes it where he is. I think his family likes it where they are in a, fairly close to his home state of Tennessee, in a good, place with good weather, in a program that he is building. Now obviously, I'm not naive enough to think that he's going to, finish his career at Coastal, because there will be a job that comes along that will offer him more than what, realistically that we can offer right now. I mean, that's just being real, right? I mean, that's just kind of the way it is. At this point, if I were to say, I don't think this year is going to be the year. I mean, I'm just going out on a limb. This is one man's opinion. I don't think this year is going to be the year. It could be next year, or it could be later this year. Who knows? But I mean, if anything's going to happen with the portal opening next week, and then, signing day coming up, coaching changes, they've got to get guys in place soon. Who knows? I don't think it's going to be this year.
Kind of along those lines, you talked about what is important to him. Not money's not the most important thing to him, things like that. Obviously there's been a lot done in the program, I guess, getting you guys to where you can win consistently. Are there other things that are kind of like the next step of the phase? I know the practice facilities coming and everything. Yeah. What's sort of the next step? And, this is what Coastal needs to continue to compete at the level they have.
Well, I think you just said it, Shane. What has to happen is this indoor facility. We need to break ground on that. And I think that's coming soon. I mean, because it's an arms race. I mean, let's just face it. You recruit off stuff like this, right? And we're recruiting now that we've added Old Dominion and James Madison and Marshall into our area, obviously going up against App, for these last several years since we made the move up. And you got Georgia Southern, Georgia State, all of these teams recruiting against one another. Of course, you got Charlotte too in the neighborhood. You got East Carolina, all sorts of, G5 schools that we're going head to head against. We've got to have the things that they have. I mean, that's just kind of how it is. And that indoor facility is a huge thing. And hopefully soon I'm hearing we're going to break ground on that. We also have a stadium expansion coming on the horizon, hopefully, where we can kind of close things in on that one end and, add some amenities down there and make things kind of just, kind of what other teams and other schools have. You know what I mean? I mean, we've got some great facilities. We've got great people that are running things at Coastal, but we need to keep taking those steps. We need to show that, hey, look, what do we need to do to keep this thing going? And I think if, Jamie sees that and that we're keeping on moving in the right direction, I think, that's kind of what he wants to see. And that's what a lot of fans want to see.
No head-to-head game this year against Troy, your opponent in the Sun Belt Conference Championship game this upcoming weekend. But over the past 2 years, you've played them at their place in Myrtle Beach and swept them. How do you kind of see this season playing out as you kind of get that preview, as you prepare for the game against Troy?
We've won the last three. You go back to that 2019 game, the year that Jamie, that was his first full year. And they came to us and we ran a 2-point conversion with about 30 seconds to go and beat them 36-35. And I kind of felt like at the time, that was an early November game. I thought, that might be a turning of the corner kind of game, because we struggled that year. We went 5-7. Of course, lost a couple after that, but that was a heck of a ball game. Troy has always had players. I mean, when we came in the league, holy mackerel, there wasn't a team that I felt like in the conference played. They were tougher and played with a harder edge than what Neil Brown's Troy teams did. They were just tough. I mean, they just got after you. And then I feel like they kind of lost their way for a couple of years. But, now with John Summerall, they've really kind of, they go back to a 10-win season this year, and they've got one of the top defenses in all of college football. And, of course, we've won the last two. We had that game in 2020 at Troy, 42-38, where we zoomed right down the field in 45 seconds and won that game. And, of course, last year, 1 touchdown game. We had to get a sack late to hold on to that thing. So I expect this game Saturday to be another close one. I really do. I think their defense is awfully good. I think it'll be the best one that we've seen. Our coaches believe that. And if we have, QB1 out there, we can move the ball and hopefully put some points on the board. And then our defense steps up and it'll be a tight, close ball game. That's how I see this thing going on Saturday.
I like how he goes nameless. He's just QB1.
That's it. That's it. Number 10, QB1. That's how we know him around here. Guy that pulls the trigger and makes things happen.
But if you do have to kind of go with your guest QB, no pun intended. Well, maybe there was a pun in there. How does that kind of change the dynamic of the game? Or is it pretty much the same thing, just maybe not quite as much run oriented as it would be for Grayson, or read oriented for Grayson? How does Guest kind of adapt to that offense, or that offense adapt to him, I should say?
He hasn't played poorly in the 2 games. I mean, you go back to the Southern Miss game against a really, really good defense, and I thought he played fairly well. He threw one bad ball, that got intercepted, and they got a touchdown off that. But he was 7-14. He dropped some passes in there. The deep ball, the deep shots, I think, are what we would do maybe a little more with him, because Grayson is still trying to, come back a little bit from that shoulder surgery that he had in the offseason. I think, Jarrett might have a little bit of an ability to stretch the field, maybe more than what Grayson does right now. And so you might look at a deep shot or two a little bit more with Jarrett out there than you would with Grayson. But he hadn't really played poorly. I mean, there were several drops on him the other day that might have been able to get drives moving and sustain drives at James Madison. The ball's right there. You got to catch it. Jared didn't do a bad job of throwing the ball there and running our offense, but then things kind of spun out of control a little bit there. But obviously, I mean, this is no slam on Jared. We're just so much more dynamic than Grayson out there, but because he knows where to go with the ball just about every single time, what play to get us into, where to go, and how to get us there. So we'll see.
What do you think is a bigger key for the Shants on Saturday? Limiting Gunnar Watson, or knowing where Carlton Marshall is on the defensive side of the ball?
Well, Carlton Marshall's had he's had a career. He has feasted on us in a couple of ball games. I mean, we've got to figure out where he is. But I mean, they have so many defenders over there. When you talk about a Juvenor, he is really good. Del Pettis on the back end and Slocum, and these guys are really, really good. And They've got a couple of other defensive linemen who are just outstanding. We've got to know where all those guys are on defense. We've got to sustain drives on offense against the defense gives up about 17 points a ball game. And they are outstanding in the fourth quarter about getting people off the field. That's the biggest thing to me offensively. If we get a drive going, we've got to sustain it, and we've got to figure out a way to get points on the board. And then, of course, defensively, obviously, too, get stops. Try to slow down Gunnar Watson in an offense that, at times they could be very dangerous. But I think the biggest thing for us on Saturday, sustain drives against what our coaches think is the best defense we've seen this year.
So we appreciate Joe for joining us to talk about the Chants. But now we have Thomas Gleason of the Trojan Wall coming on to talk about the real champs, the Western Division Troy champs.
Yes. Go
10
Western
wins.
Division.
Listen, 6 titles. You know about this, Jeremy, right? 6 titles. Sure. That's a lot. That's a lot
of titles.
It is. It's a good thing to be too. And I think that's kind of been the thing as a fan and an alum, stepping back and taking a look at the big picture, knowing that is within reach. That's a point of pride for me personally. But the whole mentality for this season for all the players and all the coaches and everybody has just been one at a time. Getting that. I'm sure we'll probably get to the miracle in a second, but it's just take it every single day. And, every single day we've done it, every single day Troy has won a game. It's 9 straight, and it's been sweeter every single time. So,
yeah, but Thomas, let me ask you this. How many times do you just wake up screaming, thinking of that Hail Mary pass that prevented you from getting that cold sweep of the Sun Belt?
Up until the South Alabama game, it was every night. So once the belt came back home after that rivalry game, I think that was the real thing that helped us fans sleep a little bit better at night. But then the Louisiana thing came along, the Louisiana game, and Troy won it in the fourth quarter, and then Troy did the same thing against Army. So the dreams didn't go away; they just changed as to who was in them.
Yeah, here's the thing that I always described Troy this year. It was a team that kind of let you think that maybe you were going to beat them until the very end, where you're like, "Oh crap, I got to score some points. I'm behind."
Right. That's exactly what it was. And even if you go back and look at the Ole Miss game, that's kind of been Troy's MO, is that they're a second half team. I was not to bring up some harsh recent memories in the Arkansas State game, but that's kind of how it's been. Well, I guess the ULM game too, because it's kind of been that the opponent has been thinking, this first half team against Troy, they're not that bad. This is within reach. What are they talking about? This isn't the dominating team. And then for some reason they flip a switch in the fourth quarter, and it is as much as it is heartbreaking for the other teams, it is causing us to buy more Prilosec in this fan base. So,
hell yeah! I'm sure that the Troy Alabama's had a run on antacids.
Absolutely,
since the start of the season.
Absolutely.
So coming into the season, though, we really thought that it was going to be the Gunnar Watson show, that it was going to be the aerial attack, the passing. You had the great receivers, the good offensive line there with Austin Stidham. But really, it's been Kamani Vidal that's really burst onto the scene. Is this really a surprise in the land of Trojans, or did he even kind of surprise y'all?
So it is a little bit of a surprise. But yes, no, I think at this outset, knowing what weapons were on this team with Tez Johnson and Ray J. Johnson Sanders, and I can't remember all the names of that wide receiving core, but I know coming into it, though, you look at all the weapons that were on this offense, and it would be normal for you to assume that this was going to be more of a spread type kind of attack. I can't remember where I saw it, but I know for a fact at some point after Summerall was hired and he brought in Brock Hayes from, I think, Louisiana Tech, And he brought in the guy who used to coach with the Patriots on the offensive line. I can't remember names. I'm bad with names right now. But he's bringing in these people and these pieces. And at some point, he straight up said, this isn't going to be the same Troy football you remember. We're going to run the ball. We're going to smash mouth people. And I remembered that. And I got excited about that, not only for me as a fan and alum, but also for content creation, just to compare the two, to see maybe, the Caleb Barker and the Brandon Silvers and Gunnar Watson up against a running Troy team. What? But as the season progressed, this first 6 games or so, you saw Gunnar Watson and Jarrett Dagey doing the passing thing and really getting it done through the air. And it was kind of like, oh, well, then maybe this is just more of the same. It's getting it done, but it's a little bit more of the same. But it feels like over the past few games, especially when not to downplay anybody, but ULM, Arkansas State, and Army are not necessarily the same caliber of team as Marshall, South Alabama, Western Kentucky, at least offensively or defensively. But when you look at the way that the schedule played out for Troy, the back half was a little bit easier. And so you got to see this offense really develop more. And the way it got done, I think one of those big second half adjustments that I just kept talking about, we realized, it seems like the coaches realized you have to run the ball to set up the pass. That's how this offense works. And sure, it seems like every single game they're relearning that, but it's working. I don't know what's happening, but in the second half is where these massive offensive rushing production is happening. Not only in the second half of the game, but in the second half of the season. Because Kamani Vidal and DK Billingsley and Jamontez Woods, even, all 3 of them, we knew at the beginning of the season they were really talented backs. And this was going to be a 3-headed monster, well, mostly a 2-headed monster this season. But you were going to see a lot of production out of them. It didn't really happen until recently. So it was a surprise to see it develop so late. But it shouldn't have been a surprise from the get-go, because I guess we were kind of expecting it more based on what John Summerall was telling us. And that's a lot of words to say. Yeah, kind of.
Nice. So 10-win season. I mean, a historical season, great season. But you started off the year with the 28-10 loss to Ole Miss. Watching that game, though, Troy really was in the game. It was you're going against the SEC. They got a little bit more depth, a little bit, faster athlete, right, whatever. But when you look at the final score, that 28-10, did you know at that point, okay, put that game away? It was an SEC game. It was a money game. But it showed that we were here. We were here to compete.
Yes.
And this season is going to be big.
I keep saying, going back to that second half team and how it shows up, that this team shows up in those quarters. Troy held Ole Miss scoreless in the second half. Now, was that because the Rebels kind of, put it into a lower gear and we're just kind of like, we got 28 points. We're not going to worry about running up the score on Troy? Maybe. Was it because this defense actually stepped up and shut down Jackson Dart in the second half? Maybe as well. But I think everybody saw John Summerall coming into this game 1 on the road again in an SEC environment. We weren't expecting to win. Maybe the players, maybe the coaches were. They'll tell you that we were expecting to win. But big picture, we all knew that this was going to be kind of more of a just to see what this team was about on the grand scale of things. We weren't expecting to beat LSU and Nebraska out of the gate, but we were impressed with what we saw. And again, they scored 28 points in the first half. And that's not necessarily a great thing. But again, that's played out the same way over the season, that they're a second half team and they don't give up. And I think that is the biggest takeaway that we've had for this entire season and that one game. We also knew that John Summerall, just the way he came in and kept people on the team and kept players around that had been through the pain of the last 3 seasons, we knew it was kind of a change. It was definitely a change into the guard, but we knew it was a change into the guard back to the way things should have been. And so I think going into the Ole Miss game, a lot of fans were, let's get through this. Let's see what it looks like. Let's see what they put on the field. And then we'll make judgments as the season progresses. Because you start the season against an Ole Miss that at one point was in the top 10, right? Like, you're probably not going to do as well as you would hope, but grand scheme of things, it was a victory, even though it was a loss.
So what are you expecting to see from this Coastal Carolina team? You're not going to get Grayson McCall. So what do you expect is going to happen in this game?
So that's the thing that I've kind of been trying to dig into myself, because he's such an important part of that offense, like not just through passing the ball, but managing the game. And it seems like, it feels like, at least in my perspective, that Coastal has won just about as many single score games as Troy has through the season. And it's kind of easy to pin it all on him. But is that really the case? They've got plenty of talent on defense, but it feels like sometimes that defense has been exposed in games like maybe the Old Dominion or the App State game. It feels like that sometimes this offense has been exposed when they don't have Grayson McCall in there, or maybe they try something different. Obviously, they were exposed against James Madison, but if you go back a game before that, they kind of held their own against Southern Miss and got it done. So I don't know what I'm expecting, but I know what this defense is about. And I know that whether or not Grayson McCall is on the field there, it's going to be, I don't know. I guess I'm trying to be tactful about saying this, but I expect Troy to kind of tamper down the offense a little bit more, whether or not Grayson McCall is on the field. He's kind of that. I will say that mobile quarterbacks and running quarterbacks have kind of been a difficult weapon against this defense. If you look at the Louisiana game and the Army game, and the way that the more recent, and Lane Hatcher with Texas State, the way they played and had that quarterback moving around so much, that's kind of been a little successful. So seeing Grayson McCall do that, Troy might be preparing for that. But if they don't have him, then it kind of feels like this defense is going to be able to expose it just like James Madison did, because they're kind of at the same level as this James Madison defense. And that's defensively and offensively. I guess that was the way you were going with that one. But offensively against their defense, it's going to be a completely different question.
Obviously, 11 wins would be huge for this team. If for whatever reason it's loss number 3 on the season, what does that do to this kind of historic season for the Trojans as they get ready for a bowl game?
I think it's a little painful, just because there's a feeling that Troy can and should get it done among this fan base. But this wouldn't be the first time we've experienced heartbreak. I mean, that miracle in App State, the more we go back and look at it and the more we feel about it, it was right for App State fans to storm the field against Troy after beating Troy on a last-second touchdown. Knowing that Troy is the one in the conference championship game and not App State, it's kind of, we can live with that kind of deal. It wouldn't nearly be as heartbreaking as that game, like we talked about. I probably won't wake up in the middle of the night knowing that maybe Grayson McCall ran for 300 yards against Troy. But it'd be a little bit of a letdown. But the whole mantra for this team, the whole mantra for the coaches and the players this year has literally been, so what, now what? You move on, you get to the next step. And I know I'm kind of like being PR for the team at this point with the way I talk about it, but the truth of the matter is this team, it doesn't stay down, and that has been bad for my heart, but great for my love for the program as an alum.
So in addition to football, obviously basketball's dominating as always with Scott Cross.
Yeah.
How do you see that kind of shaking out this year with his team? That's kind of my preseason dark horse on the West Side, and maybe even for the league as a whole.
Yeah, I noticed that there was some poll that had, it was I don't know what account it was, but like maybe an hour or two ago, I saw the this Twitter account had a power poll of Sunbelt teams, and Troy was ranked 4th. I expect Scott Cross to be, the team hired him to come in and win maybe 20 games a year, compete for the title. And he got to that point in year 3, I think, last year. But it's just keeping that momentum going. I think Troy beating Florida State was a big victory for the team, even though Florida State is kind of one of those down ACC programs this year. It's still kind of a badge of honor for this team. But looking forward, knowing that what Troy's faced, at least comparing it to Arkansas, is going to be equal or if not as good to what the way they played against Arkansas, and some of the teams that and Florida State maybe. But knowing that what they've gotten done against these supposedly better programs, and then looking at the Sun Belt schedule up down the road, it doesn't feel like it's as much of an uphill battle as it used to be for the Trojans, who have been, at the bottom of the barrel for the past few seasons. It's exciting to know that the basketball team, just in a vacuum, looking at this team, could potentially be another, gunning for the championship again. But we also know it's November, so we're just here for the funsies at this point.
Well, Thomas, that's all we have. We look forward to a great game on Saturday as the Trojans host the Chants for Sunbelt Conference Championship game. Tell people how they can find you and how they can check out your work.
Yeah, well, I'm here on behalf of the Trojan Wall, which is at Trojan Wall F5. That's used to be Forgotten 5 on Twitter. So you can find us there. I'm also doing, I'm still working with Sunbelt Pages, which is at SB Pages. We're there too. So those are the two places you can find what we're doing. But for all the Troy content you need, go to that first one, Trojan Wall, and thetrojanwall.com is our website. So I appreciate y'all having me on. Appreciate you giving me a platform to tell people to visit my website. And I appreciate the conversation, guys. This is seriously, as an alum, this is an exciting moment in Troy athletics history, and I'm glad to be able to be, at least documenting part of it.
To put a big bow on the regular season, we all came up with our Fun Belt Heisman, offensive, defensive, best game, worst game, coach of the year, highlight, and then peeking ahead into 2023. What game or games are you most looking forward to? Shane, kick us off there with, I think, our unanimous Fun Belt Heisman Player of the Year.
Yeah, I mean, if it's unanimous, I guess I'll just go and say it. I had Todd Centeio. I guess we all have him as the Player of the Year.
Todd Centeio, Player of the Year, and how can you say no to that? Just a great all-around quarterback. He can run. He can throw. He can lead. When he's hurt, the team is hurt. Good, great. I think that, Centeio. Who else would compete with Centeio? Van Treese?
I think Van Treese was close. Looking ahead, he was my selection for Offensive Player of the Year. I feel like he was the big reason that the Eagles had the success that they did have. And so for that, I give it to Van Treese as Offensive Player of the Year.
My Offensive Player of the Year, I think Centeio is probably the guy. And I think Van Treese is a good selection too. But Labrum from Marshall, he was by far the guy with the most rushing yards this year. And a guy that kind of came out of nowhere. So, or at least in my mind, because everybody's talking about Ali, right? So, to me, he's probably the guy that offensively is the offensive, just because he seemed to dominate his position more than anybody else on in the Sun Belt. But I pick any one of those three guys.
Yeah, I had Liborn as my Offensive Player of the Year as well. I mean, I think I would listen to arguments for Van Treese. Grayson McCall, I think, is still in the conversation there when you just look at his numbers and, his record as a starting quarterback. But yeah, I went with Liborn too. I just feel like, he was by far the best running back in the conference, and his numbers at that position were probably as impressive as, a Centeio or McCall or Van Treese, what they did at the quarterback position.
Defensive Player of the Year, I think another unanimous selection there. Jason Henderson, a linebacker from Old Dominion. The guy averaged like 1 million tackles a game. He was a constant playmaker. He was very much that Monarchs defense and was what really kept them in the game because that offense really seemed to be very anemic or very explosive and not very much in between. It was a yin or yang situation on the offensive side.
Yeah, and he was my defensive player of the year too. I mean, when you consider the all-time leader NCAA in tackling is also in this conference, and he was not even close to where Henderson was this season as far as the number of tackles. I think it's just incredible to look at that number of stops that guy made on his own.
So, Jeremy, our next category, the best game of the year. Give it to me of what you have for the best game of the year.
I'm gonna cheat a little bit.
Go figure. And
I hate to do this, and I hate that it's not even a conference game, because we had tremendous conference games. Like, for instance, I thought South Alabama versus Troy, that 10-6 game that happened, I think it was a Thursday night, national TV. It really sort of demonstrated that the Sun Belt was no longer the Fun Belt. And by that, I meant it wasn't like just all offense, that the only thing the Sun Belt can possibly do is throw a bunch of passes and just sort of ignore all other facets of the game. So to me, that was a great game. But to me, the best time was week 2, when it was upset week for the P5 programs. You had Notre Dame going down to Marshall. You had Georgia Southern beating Nebraska. You had Appalachian State taking down number 6 at the time, which is kind of funny, Texas A&M. It was just a great time. So I have to hand it. I'm going to give those 3 games, which I know is kind of cheating, but those were my favorite games.
Shane, what do you have for best game of the year?
I had the one that Jeremy mentioned. I had Troy, South Alabama. Just like you said, national TV, old school throwback type of game that was down to the wire against maybe the 2 best teams in the conference, 2 10-win teams, in-state rivals. I mean, it's hard to just kind of beat all of that put together in one game.
Yeah, I didn't even mention it was the battle for the belt. I mean, it had everything, Shane. That game had everything.
My best game, week 3. With all the hype that happened in week 2, you knew that there was going to be a letdown in week 3, but there was not, as there was the miracle on the mountaintop of Troy and App State. Yes, I still admit Troy was robbed, but with all of the hype that was going on, College Game Day being in Boone, that final Hail Mary to really get the Mountaineers that huge win and just give the nation a true taste of Fun Belt football. I loved it. That was my best game.
Which is funny because it was like the opposite of South Alabama versus Troy, where it was nothing but defense. This was just bonzo offense, and that was a cool game. Wow, we had some great games in the Sun Belt. And I think there's some games we haven't even touched on. I mean, first of all, Coastal Carolina, they were the kings of just coming up with squeaky wins. And so I think Southern Miss had like a string of 3 games where they won by less than a touchdown. So there was a lot of great games this year that were decided at the last few moments that I think the Sun Belt, in terms of entertainment, really did deliver this year. And I hope ESPN takes notice and starts putting us in even better time slots.
For all the greatness, there were also badness. There you go, Jeremy. There's a made-up word for you.
All right.
The Worcester football games. For me, I still have heartburn over this game. UCLA 32, South Alabama 31. I told you I'm not getting over that game anytime soon.
No, and you know what? That was a feather that was completely missed for the Sun Belt.
Yeah, that was like drunken goggles trying to put the key in the door to get into your apartment. It would have made 2 straight weeks of P5 upsets, and we just couldn't get it. And the damn fake field goal.
And you know, to play what if South Alabama wins that game, man. Troy doesn't fall on the Hail Mary and the best game we just talked about. Think about what Troy is playing for this week if those 2 things happen. And you're talking about just, a fraction of an inch away from, the Sun Belt champion being in the Cotton Bowl.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And that was like right there at the beginning of the season, right? When the Sun Belt was coming up with all these upsets, which makes me even madder that the Sun Belt isn't being represented at all right now by the College Playoff Football Committee. I'll probably complain about that later. But to go back a little bit, I hate to do this, but there were a couple games that we missed on some of the best games. And those are two stunning comebacks from James Madison. First against Appalachian State, where they were down big in the first half. And then against Georgia State, where they were down big in the first half. Came back from impossible odds. So, again, those were great games. I thought the worst game, though, and don't kill me, Thibs, but the worst game I saw this year from the Sun Belt was Army versus the ULM Warhawks. Oh, my God. What a complete meltdown.
Thank you for letting me relive that. I will be sending my counseling bill to you so that I can try to make it through that. And just so that you know, that's a 2023 matchup in Malone Stadium as well.
Well, absolutely. Well, good. I'm glad you're going to look forward to that too. And it should be a good game. What was funny about that game was that it started off good. It started off with ULM and Army kind of, trading field position and whatever, and ULM looking really good. So then I switch it on, and it's just nothing but Army plowing through ULM. Oh my God. It was the hardest thing to watch. So yeah, that's my worst game of the year.
My worst was Charlotte beating Georgia State 42-41. Just there was no excuse for anybody in the Sun Belt to lose to Charlotte this year. That was the worst performance in the conference of the season. That was the worst game for me.
Yeah, that was a pretty rough game. It sort of underscored what Georgia State was this year, which was just a team that just could not figure out how to win. It was a little bit embarrassing. I'll give you a close example of that was Arkansas State having so much trouble with UMass. That was even in a win. I think Arkansas State won something like 38-36 or whatever. It was just gross to watch. So, with all the good wins that the Sun Belt has come up with, we certainly did have our share of bad losses.
But the man that's in charge of all of the football, the head coach of the year, my vote for coach of the year, Southern Miss's Will Hall. Bounces back from year one of 3-9 to go 6-6 with an OT game against Liberty, a great showing really against Miami, and beat Tulane, the team that will be the G5 representative in the college playoff.
Oh, don't get me started. Don't get me angry. I don't want to start being mad. But yes, that is a great pick, Thibs. Will Hall pulling Southern Miss from the depths of hell into a competitive and bowl-bound team. That's pretty awesome. I think my pick, I think it's going to end up being the pick that the Sun Belt winds up bestowing. I think it's going to be John Sumrall, first-year head coach. Yeah, disappointing season for the Trojans the year before. Sumrall comes in there, provides a new energy, a new identity for the Troy Trojans. I've never seen this much enthusiasm for Troy and the Trojans since Neil Brown days, which was a few years ago. I got to give it to John Sumrall. And even though there are tremendous candidates like Will Hall, like Clay Hilton, like Coach Signetti, there's just so many good guys you can pick from, but Sumrall has to be my guy.
I'm with you. I could be talked into a handful of different people, including everybody that's been mentioned, but I also went with Sumrall for all the same reasons.
Really? Wouldn't be Coach Signetti?
I could be talked into him, but I went with Sumrall.
So we before we wrap up the show there, we close out looking at the 2023 schedule. A lot of non-conference games there. The ones that I really have circled, South Alabama travels to Tulane. I have the feeling that the Jags are going to have another one-and-done quarterback like they've done here the past few years and be able to really pull off that upset once again of a Sun Belt going over the ACC or the AAC. Thanks, Jeremy. You have me mixed up with my letters there.
It's my fault.
The other game, and it would be great to have kind of that clean sweep. Southern Miss host Tulane. They could go 2-0 against the Wave, as well as having the Sun Belt go 2-0 over the AAC champions once again.
Yeah, but then you also talked about ULM versus Army. Isn't that something that you would like to see?
I'd rather see ULM over Texas A&M to mark 2 years in a row that the Sun Belt goes in, gets a check, and leaves old rivalry behind. Shane, who do you look at for next year?
The one I picked out of the list that you had was JMU going to Virginia, partially because I'll be there. Looking forward to it. It's huge thing in this part of the country. It'll be also, I believe, the first game at Scott Stadium since the tragic shooting at UVA. So that will add a whole nother unfortunate dynamic to it. But at the same time, I also expect the crowd to be probably close to 50-50 between JMU and UVA fans in Charlottesville. So I think that one will be an interesting to watch for the Sun Belt.
Well, personally, I love conference rematches, and I'm looking forward to getting another crack at Troy, especially after our last game where we played so well. But for me, it will always be Arkansas State versus Memphis. Those are the only 4 games, or one of the games that's set in stone. Memphis is a huge rival to Arkansas State, even if Memphis doesn't know it. Winning against an AAC team is always nice because, quite frankly, I feel like the Sun Belt has surpassed the AAC, and yet the AAC continues to get favor from the committee, and it bugs the hell out of me. And just beating those guys, it used to be that Conference USA was the conference that I really wanted to choke the hell out of. Now it's the American. I want you to join me in that, guys. Join me in hating the American. Thibs, Shane, join me in this.
We support America. That's why we lost to Army.
That could be true. So, yes, that's the game I'm looking forward to most. Memphis comes to visit Arkansas State. I'm going to be there. I'm going to have a bunch of hot dogs and hamburgers, and I can't wait to grill the Tigers.
So as we close out the show, plugs, promos, parting shots. Also, give me your take. Who do you see winning the game on Saturday and lifting the Sun Belt Conference Championship trophy from Keith Gill?
That'll just be my parting shot. I'm picking Troy all the way on that one. I think they'll handle a Coastal fairly easily.
I'm going to make a pick and a parting shot. The pick, Coastal Carolina, I grew to love as the season went on. Thought they were just a very complete team. That defense is stout. The offense just seems to put up just enough points to win. They're kind of fun to watch. Then I witnessed that slaughter that JMU put down on Coastal Carolina, and it really changed my view. I've got to pick Troy. Troy's just the more complete team. Now that they have Vidal running like a maniac, I feel like there's just no way Troy loses this game, which is probably why Coastal will win, but I have to pick Troy. And as far as my parting shot, it was going to be about how much I hate the committee right now, the college playoff committee, the way they're completely ignoring the Sun Belt, the way they just sort of seem to elevate American teams like it's just some lazy thing that they put at that they tag at the end of the poll. They're not really taking it seriously. It's really bugging me. I don't know why they love Tulane so much. It drives me crazy. But that's not what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk a little bit, my parting shot being about the transfer portal, which, if you're following social media right now, you'll see a lot of guys.
Are you leaving us, Jeremy?
What?
Are you leaving us?
No, I'm not transferring. Oh my
okay.
God. Well, I was going to transfer to the group of 5 guys, but the NIL money just wasn't there. So I'm going to stay here for another season. No. I don't mind the transfer portal so much. It kind of works for us or for smaller teams as it does for bigger teams. But one thing that I kind of want to explore is this idea of compensation for development, a developmental fee. For instance, we've got guys that are leaving in the transfer portal that Arkansas State has spent 2 or 3 years developing into a great player. Now they're going to go somewhere else, not needing any of that development. Why should we not be compensated for that? Why shouldn't a JMU or a ULM or anybody in the Sun Belt just trying to make ends meet, trying to put out a good team? Why should they have to waste their resources developing a punter or a quarterback or a cornerback or a running back and then have them leave and you have nothing in return? So I think for the next week, I'm going to explore this idea of some sort of developmental fee and see how that bounces off the internet.
So for my Sunbelt Championship pick, because I feel like I've been cheering for the wrong side all year long, I'm going to try a little reverse psychology.
All right.
I'm breaking out the tail this weekend in hopes that my cheering of the Sea Chickens can propel Troy to the win.
Hey, before you go on, is there some such thing as divisional pride? You and I, Thibs, creatures of the Sun Belt West. Shane, a snobby creature of the snobby East.
And he's an Eastern champion. Don't forget that part.
That's right. And an Eastern champion. Do you feel some sort of pride for your division? Is that valid?
I'm doing my part by saying that the teams I cheer for are typically the ones that are taking the L's. So as I don my shants till, know that my heart is bleeding the Scarlet of Troy.
Okay. Wow. All right. I like that.
So we will recap the championship game next week and dive in headfirst to the postseason of volleyball that JMU once again dominated that as well. And a lot of Sunbelt Conference teams going into the postseason there as well. And then jumping into basketball, guys, as we are just weeks away from Sunbelt Conference action opening up there. So for Dusty Thibodeau, Warhawk Report, Jeremy Harper, Hellraiser.com, Shane Netlin of the Daily News Record that Jeremy can never remember. We appreciate you listening in and look forward to seeing you next week.